Mercedes GLA, Audi Q3, BMW X1. 3 badges, 3 very different philosophies, and honestly one question that I keep coming back to every single time someone asks me what compact luxury SUV they should be putting their money into. Which one of these things actually delivers on what it promises when the showroom lighting is gone, the test drive is over, and you're living with it on a Tuesday morning in traffic? Because I've been in all 3. I've spent real time with all 3, and I've got some thoughts that might actually surprise you. The 2026 BMW X1 is what we're digging into today, but I'm not going to do this in isolation because that would be doing you a disservice. The whole story only makes sense when you understand where the X1 sits relative to what's competing against it. So let's get into it properly. And hey, welcome to Luxury Motor if you're new here. This is where honest car conversation lives. No fluff, no sponsored talking points, just real perspective from people who genuinely care about getting this right. Subscribe and stick around because we've got a lot more coming. All right, let's talk X1. I want to open this differently than I normally would. Instead of starting under the hood, I want to start with a feeling. Because I've come to understand over years of driving different cars that your gut reaction in the first 60 seconds of being around a vehicle tells you more than any spec sheet ever could. First time I walked up to the 2026 X1 after spending time with the GLA and Q3 back-to-back, something registered differently. The GLA feels polished and premium, but almost a little precious, like it's dressed up for an occasion rather than built for your actual life. The Q3 feels solid and trustworthy, but if I'm being real with you, it's a little anonymous. It doesn't make you feel anything in particular. The X1, though, the X1 feels like it was designed by someone who actually drives, and that distinction, subtle as it sounds, shapes absolutely everything about this car's character. Now let's get into what's powering the 2026 X1, because this is where some genuinely interesting choices live. The xDrive 23i is your starting point, a 2.0-liter, 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine producing around 204 horsepower, paired with a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic and BMW's xDrive all-wheel drive system. I've learned that dual-clutch transmissions get a bad reputation sometimes for low-speed behavior, but BMW has tuned this one well enough that it doesn't have that nervous, jerky quality in parking lots and slow traffic that plagued earlier implementations. It's smooth where it needs to be smooth and quick where you want it to be quick. Here's my honest comparison, though. The GLA 250 produces similar power numbers, around 221 horsepower in its base configuration. The Q3 45 TFSI pushes around 228 horsepower. On paper, the X1's base spec looks slightly conservative. What I've noticed in real-world driving is that those numbers don't tell the whole story. BMW's power delivery and chassis tuning mean the X1 feels more alive and more responsive than those raw horsepower comparisons suggest. There's a willingness to the X1 that the Q3 in particular simply doesn't match. The xDrive 30i steps things up meaningfully with around 245 horsepower and a broader torque spread that transforms highway driving and overtaking from calculated maneuvers into genuinely effortless actions. This is the variant I'd personally be steering most buyers toward, and I'll explain exactly why when we get to my opinion section. Then there's the xDrive 30e plug-in hybrid, which in my experience is the most underappreciated version of the entire X1 lineup. Combined output of around 326 horsepower, pure electric range of roughly 60 to 70 kilometers. I've experienced this powertrain in daily driving conditions extensively enough to say, with real confidence, that for buyers with home charging access, this version fundamentally changes the economics of ownership. Most daily driving happens entirely on electricity. The combustion engine becomes your long-distance safety net rather than your primary energy source. Neither the GLA nor Q3 offers a PHEV option that matches this level of real-world electric range in this class, and I believe that gap is more significant than most comparison reviews give it credit for. For the fully electric crowd, the iX1 xDrive 30 sits alongside the X1 family with 313 horsepower dual-motor all-wheel drive and real-world range above 270 miles, but that's a whole separate conversation for another video. Let me tell you about how the X1 looks, because I want to be honest with you about something I've grown to appreciate over time with this car. When the current generation X1 first appeared, I thought the design was evolutionary rather than revolutionary. I used to think that was a weakness. Now I understand it's actually one of the smartest things BMW did with this generation, because while the GLA went aggressively styled and the Q3 went clean and almost clinical, BMW found this middle ground of confident maturity that I think wears better over time than either of the alternatives. The front end is structured and purposeful, that kidney grille is properly sized and well integrated rather than dominating the face, framed by slim, precise LED headlights with a graphic that communicates premium intent without shouting about it. What I've noticed when parking these three cars side by side is that the X1 is the one people walk toward first. There's something about the proportions that just looks right in a way that's hard to articulate but easy to see. The side profile benefits from a longer wheelbase than the previous generation, delivering better visual balance and critically more interior space that actually translates to real-world usability. The body surfacing has this taut quality with a rising character line that adds visual tension without resorting to unnecessary creases or decoration. Compared to the GLA's more fashion-forward surfacing and the Q3's more conservative treatment, the X1 sits in this sweet spot of looking properly designed without looking overdressed. Looking rear end is clean, resolved, and confident. Those connected LED taillights emphasize width beautifully. The dual exhaust finishing on petrol variants adds just the right note of performance visual intent. Looking back at the Q3's rear, which I've always found slightly bland, and the GLA's rear, which tries hard but feels a little busy to me, the X1's rear end is simply the most resolved of the three. Now inside, because this is genuinely where the comparison becomes decisive in my opinion. The curved display, combining 10.29-inch driver display and 10.7-inch central touchscreen running IDI8, is the most coherent, most usable infotainment experience in this competitive set. I want to be specific about this because I've heard people dismiss it as just a bigger screen. It isn't. The processing speed, the menu logic, the voice recognition quality, the physical interaction between the display and the touch-sensitive climate controls below it, the whole system operates as a genuinely integrated piece of technology rather than a screen bolted to a dashboard. I've experienced the MBUX system in the GLA extensively. It's sophisticated and impressive on a technical level, but honestly, it can feel like it demands your attention in a way that IDI8 doesn't. The Q3's MMI system is functional and familiar, but it feels a generation behind in terms of processing speed and interface design. BMW wins this comparison clearly, and it's not particularly close. Material quality inside the X1 is strong and strategically deployed. The surfaces you interact with most frequently communicate genuine premium quality. Soft-touch dashboard surfaces, well-weighted controls, optional leather upholstery that has proper substance to it. What I've noticed is that BMW makes smarter decisions about where to spend the material budget than either competitor. You feel the quality where it matters, rather than encountering it in places that don't affect your daily experience. Here's something that I think is genuinely underreported in X1 coverage: the rear seat experience. The longer wheelbase translates to rear legroom that's meaningfully better than the GLA, which has always been its most significant practical weakness in my experience. Real adults can sit back there without the apologetic conversation about how it's fine for short trips. That matters enormously for a compact SUV that families are actually going to use as a family vehicle. Cargo space at around 500 liters with seats up is competitive with the Q3 and ahead of the GLA, another practical point where BMW quietly wins a comparison that doesn't always get highlighted. Driver assistance technology is comprehensive and mature. The full suite covers adaptive cruise with stop and go, active lane change, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, and surround view cameras with a 3D perspective option that makes urban parking genuinely effortless. What I've come to understand about BMW's assistance system specifically is that they're tuned to work with your driving style, rather than constantly intervening against it. That difference in philosophy creates a fundamentally different relationship with the technology. Alright, here's where I give you my straight, honest take. GLA, Q3, or X1? For me, it's the X1, and it's not a particularly conflicted decision. The GLA is beautiful and the MBUX technology is impressive, but it sacrifices too much rear seat practicality for its styling choices, and the driving dynamics don't justify the premium it commands over the X1 in my experience.
The Q3 is honest and solid, but it simply doesn't excite. It's a competent appliance when this class of vehicles should be more than that. What I've come to understand about the X1 after spending real time